Welcome to Classical Conversations News. Today on Meet the Composer, we'll meet someone who is widely considered one of the 19th century's greatest composers and one of the leading musicians of the Romantic era. We're so excited to welcome Johannes Brahms.
Thank you.
Hello there and welcome. We're so happy to talk to you today and understand more about your life.
Thank you for having me. It's been a long time since I've been out and about. Wow, all the latest styles, they have changed since the 1800s.
But let's start at the beginning. Can you tell us how and where you started?
I'm happy to share. I was born May 7th, 1833 in Hamburg, Germany. I hear some of you know where Germany is on the map. I was the second of my parents' three children. My parents were very poor, but my father was an accomplished musician who could play just about any instrument he touched. I begged my father to teach me piano, but he was more comfortable with the stringed instruments, so he found one of the best teachers for me named Wilhelm Kossel. Poor guy. I wanted to practice all hours of the day and the night, but he was very patient with me.
Well, it sounds like your love of music definitely kept you busy. Did you have time for anything else?
In order to help out my family, sometimes I would make extra money playing dance music at these smoky taverns on Hamburg's waterfront. But many agreed that was no place for a youth used to be spending his time. It didn't bother me much because I always brought my books along. I read adventure stories, poems, escaping into stories to keep my mind off of my exhausting work.
But I hear that unlike some musicians of your era, you didn't primarily make music for money, but for the love of music itself. Could you tell me more?
While I was able to gather some wealth from my compositions, I continued to live very simply. In Vienna, Austria, I worked as a conductor, music teacher, and a composer. I liked walking in nature, and I bought candy with me to give to the children. I passed on my walks. I never wanted a fancy home. I wore cheap clothes, and like you'd say from what you call the Walmart, where you get cheap clothes for not much. So I would get the cheap clothes like the Walmart, and sometimes forgot to wear socks. I had too much music on my mind. I love the music. Who needs socks anyway?
Fair enough. But you did have a reputation for having a softer side with children, like you said regarding giving them candy. But, how do I put this nicely? You're a bit stubborn and sarcastic with adults. Some would call you a grump in your later years.
Well, I suppose I do have to admit that is true. I was a bit of a perfectionist too, and would often destroy finished pieces I deemed unworthy, including some venti string quartets. You understand venti? You say 20.
20.
20. I eventually composed 4 symphonies during my life, but it took me many years before I got up the nerve to try one for the first time. They're written for a large orchestra and usually have 3 or 4 parts that are called movements. Very complicated, right? I was afraid of everyone comparing my symphonies to the great symphonies of Beethoven, who died just a few years before I was born.
I can totally understand being afraid of living in Beethoven's shadow, but music was changing during your time, and people were excited for the new feeling you added to your pieces. For example, for over 100 years, children all over the world would be falling asleep to your lullaby, which was originally called Wiegenlied.
100 years. Okay. Well, maybe I don't feel so bad now.
Before you go, tell us about the time you met the great American inventor Thomas Edison.
Ah, yes, well, I suppose the students here might enjoy hearing about that. In 1889, he visited me in Vienna and invited me to perform an experimental music recording. I played a shortened version of my Hungarian dance number 1 on the piano. It was one of the earliest recordings ever made by a major composer.
Oh, wow, that's pretty huge if you ask me. But just so you know, Mr. Brahms, since the time of your death in 1897, people consider your music some of the most perfect music ever, and your 64 years of life earned you the honor of being known as one of the three Bs: Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms. You should be very proud. Thank you for sharing your life with us today.
You're very welcome. Very welcome.
Join us next
I was
time.
very happy to be here. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Anytime you want me to come.